Hello everyone. Today we are going to study socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. Let's take a trip back in time to when the French Revolution was shaking things up. The French Revolution sparked ideas of freedom and equality, challenging the traditional societal structure dominated by the aristocracy and church. These revolutionary ideas didn't just stay in France, they traveled far and wide, inspiring folks like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Desrosiers over in India. Moving on, let's see how Europe reacted to these game-changing ideas. In Europe, people had different ideas on how to respond to these calls for change. Some preferred taking it slow and steady, while others were all about shaking things up big time. This gave rise to terms we still use today: conservatives, liberals, and radicals. Each group had its own vision for the future. Now, let's dive into how these beliefs paved the way for something huge: the Russian Revolution. The 19th century was a rollercoaster of political traditions, leading to massive events like the Russian Revolution. This was no small affair. It aimed to completely transform society. And amidst this turmoil, socialism began to rise as a force that would shape the entire 20th century. But who were the key players in this story? Let's find out. The society was divided into groups with differing opinions. Liberals advocated for religious tolerance, representative government, and individual rights, but limited suffrage to property-owning men, excluding women. Radicals sought majority-based governance. They supported women's suffrage and opposed concentration of wealth. Conservatives were initially resistant to change but accepted gradual transformation, emphasizing respect for tradition. As society was evolving, so was the way people worked and lived. Next up, the Industrial Revolution. The 19th century wasn't just about political changes. It also saw a massive transformation in society and the economy, thanks to the Industrial Revolution. New cities popped up, railways expanded, but it wasn't all good news. Factory labor brought long hours, low wages, and unemployment, exacerbating housing and sanitation issues. Amidst this industrial chaos, different groups had their own ideas on how to improve things. Liberals and radicals believed in hard work and education to uplift the workforce. Meanwhile, nationalists, alongside liberals and radicals, wanted to topple monarchies to create societies based on equal rights. Their ideas were inspired by thinkers like Giuseppe Mazzini and even reached revolutionaries in India. This growing desire for change set the stage for socialism to make its grand entrance in Europe. The arrival of socialism was seen through its emergence and vision. By the mid-19th century, socialism gained traction in Europe, challenging private property as the root of social issues. Socialists started advocating for collective control of property to prioritize societal welfare over individual gain. But socialism wasn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Let's explore the different flavors it came in. Robert Owen proposed cooperative communities like New Harmony. Louis Blanc suggested government support for cooperatives to replace capitalist enterprises. Karl Marx envisioned a communist society where workers overthrow capitalism and collectively control property, believing it to be the natural future society. As socialism's popularity grew, so did its support base. Let's check out who was backing these ideas. By the 1870s, socialism wasn't just a bunch of ideas, it had become a movement. In places like England and Germany, workers banded together, demanding better living and working conditions. They even formed political parties to push for these changes. But despite their growing influence, socialists faced hurdles in gaining political power. Up next, how did they fare? Associations collaborated with political parties like the Social Democratic Party, SPD, in Germany, leading to the formation of Labour Party in Britain and Socialist Party in France by 1905. Despite strong representation in parliamentary politics, socialists failed to form governments in Europe until 1914. However, Their ideas influenced legislation while conservatives, liberals, and radicals continued to govern. This sets the stage for one of the biggest revolutions in history, the Russian Revolution. Let's dive into the chaos and hope it brought. Before the storm of the 1917 revolution, Russia was a land of deep contrasts and simmering unrest. Governed by Tsar Nicholas II, it was a vast empire with a melting pot of cultures but plagued by economic disparity and authoritarian rule. But let us start by learning more about the Russian Empire. In 1914, Tsar Nicholas II governed the vast Russian Empire, which encompassed territories from Moscow to the Pacific, including modern-day Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, parts of Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Central Asian states, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. The empire comprised diverse religious groups, with Russian Orthodox Christianity predominant, alongside Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, and Buddhists. At the start of the 20th century, most Russians were farmers, unlike Europe where fewer people worked in agriculture. Russia was a big grain seller. Factories were mainly in St. Petersburg and Moscow, with big ones and small craft workshops. Workers, many of them, faced tough conditions, and women got less pay than men. Strikes were common in factories. In the countryside, peasants farmed most land, but they often had fights with rich landowners. How did this tension explode into revolution? On to the next slide to find out. Before 1914, all political parties were illegal in Russia. The Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, founded in 1898, operated covertly due to government surveillance. Socialists believed that Russian peasants, not workers, would drive the revolution, leading to the formation of the Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1900, advocating for peasant rights and land redistribution. However, Lenin, leading the Bolsheviks, disagreed, arguing for a disciplined party structure to navigate Tsarist repression, while the Mensheviks favored a more open approach. This debate set the stage for the 1905 revolution, a crucial warm-up act for what was to come. Russia was an autocracy where the Tsar held absolute power, unlike European monarchs subject to parliaments. In 1905, liberals, social democrats, and socialist revolutionaries, alongside peasants, workers, and nationalists, demanded a constitution and civil liberties, leading to the 1905 revolution. Let us see a major incident known as Bloody Sunday. It was sparked by workers' demands for better conditions. The peaceful protest led by Father Gapon was violently suppressed by police and Cossacks, resulting in numerous casualties, igniting widespread strikes and unrest. But what changes were seen after this revolution? Let us see the aftermath. Tsar Nicholas II reluctantly allowed the creation of a consultative parliament or Duma, but quickly dismissed both the first and second Dumas when they challenged his authority. Post-1905, political activity faced severe restrictions, with many unions and committees operating unofficially due to being declared illegal. The Tsar manipulated voting laws to favor conservative politicians, excluding liberals and revolutionaries from the Duma. As Russia entered World War I, the stage was set for an even greater upheaval. World War I was a disaster for Russia. The First World War erupted in 1914, pitting the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Turkey, against the Allies, France, Britain, Russia. Initially, Russians rallied around Tsar Nicholas II, but as the war dragged on, dissatisfaction grew due to the Tsar's refusal to consult the Duma and the influence of unpopular advisors like Rasputin. Unlike the static trench warfare in the West, the Eastern Front saw mobile battles with large casualties. Russia suffered defeats in Germany and Austria, resulting in over 7 million casualties by 1917 and widespread destruction. The war's strain on society brought Russia to the brink. The war severely impacted Russian industry, with few domestic industries and disruption of supply routes due to German control of the Baltic Sea. Industrial equipment deteriorated rapidly, leading to breakdowns in railway lines and labor shortages. As able-bodied men were conscripted, labor shortages led to the closure of small workshops, causing scarcity of essential goods in cities. Grain supplies were diverted to feed the army, exacerbating food shortages and triggering riots at bread shops by winter. And then, in the cold winter of 1917, everything changed. Petrograd, now St. Petersburg, became the heart of a new revolution in February 1917. Petrograd's layout highlighted social divides: workers' quarters on the right bank, elites on the left. Food shortages and harsh winter intensified unrest in February 1917. Lockout at a factory sparked strikes, notably on International Women's Day. Demonstrators marched to Nevsky Prospect, facing a government-imposed curfew. Escalation despite curfews led to the Duma's suspension on February 25. Politicians' opposition fueled protests, escalating with the ransacking of police headquarters on February 27. Cavalry's refusal to fire signaled a shift, leading to regiments' mutiny. Tsar abdicated on March 2, paving the way for a provisional government supported by the Petrograd Soviet. The situation escalated quickly, leading to a moment that would change Russia forever. Provisional government was formed with influence from army officials, landowners, and industrialists. Liberals and socialists within the government aimed for an elected administration, lifting restrictions on public gatherings. Establishment of Soviets across Russia, like the Petrograd Soviet, without a uniform electoral system. The Tsar's abdication marked a new chapter for Russia, with a provisional government trying to steer the ship. But not everyone was on board with their direction. A man named Lenin came up with some radical ideas. Lenin's return in April 1917 marked by his April Theses, advocating for the end of the war, land redistribution, and bank nationalization. Initially surprising to many Bolsheviks, Lenin's agenda gained traction as discontent against the provisional government grew. Summer saw the spread of the workers' movement, with the formation of factory committees and soldiers' committees challenging authority. These ideas set the stage for another, even more radical revolution. Let's find out what happened. The Revolution of October 1917. Tensions between the provisional government and Bolsheviks intensified, with Lenin fearing a dictatorship. Lenin orchestrated discussions for an uprising, leading to the formation of a military revolutionary committee. On the 24th of October 1917, the uprising began in Petrograd, with Bolshevik forces seizing control of key government buildings. The Winter Palace was shelled, signaling the Bolshevik win, followed by uprisings in other cities. By December, Bolsheviks dominated the Moscow-Petrograd region, solidifying their power. But what did this new era look like? And what challenges did it bring? Onwards to see the changes and challenges that followed. Bolsheviks enacted radical reforms, nationalizing industries, banks, and declaring land as social property. They abolished aristocratic titles, redistributed housing, and redesigned uniforms to signify the societal change. The party transformed into the Russian Communist Party, Bolshevik, and dismissed the Constituent Assembly in 1918. Despite opposition, they made peace with Germany in March 1918, establishing a one-party state. Trade unions were controlled by the party, and dissent was punished by the secret police, leading to artistic experimentation but also disillusionment due to censorship. As opposition grew, so did the stakes. The stage was set for a brutal civil war. After Bolsheviks ordered land redistribution, the Russian army began to disintegrate as soldiers deserted to claim land. Non-Bolshevik groups, including socialists, liberals, and supporters of autocracy, condemned the uprising and organized against the Bolsheviks. During 1918–1919, the Greens, Socialist Revolutionaries, and Whites, pro-Tsarists, controlled much of Russia, supported by foreign troops. Civil war ensued, marked by looting, banditry, and famine, weakening the non-Bolshevik forces. Bolsheviks ultimately prevailed by January 1920, largely due to cooperation with non-Russian nationalities and Muslim Jadidists. Bolshevik victory led to the creation of the Soviet Union, USSR, in December 1922 from the former Russian Empire. Non-Russian nationalities were granted political autonomy, but Bolshevik policies often clashed with local desires, leading to mixed success in winning over different groups. Unpopular policies, such as discouraging nomadism, hindered efforts to gain widespread support among non-Russian nationalities. Confusion persisted regarding the Bolshevik government's true nature and intentions. But the story doesn't end there. How did the USSR work towards building a socialist society? Let's take a look. The Civil War years were tough, but the Bolsheviks kept their focus on nationalizing key industries and promoting collective farming. The first two five-year plans marked ambitious attempts to industrialize rapidly, changing the face of the Soviet economy. Centralized planning fueled economic growth, with industrial production doubling between 1929 and 1933, notably in oil, coal, and steel. However, rapid construction of factories, such as in Magnitogorsk, led to poor working conditions and numerous work stoppages. Despite challenges, the government implemented initiatives like extended schooling, university access for workers and peasants, creches in factories, and affordable healthcare. These efforts varied in effectiveness due to limited government resources, resulting in uneven impacts across the population. Yet, with rapid change came new challenges, especially under Stalin's rule. In the late 1920s, Soviet Russia faced a crisis of grain supplies, leading Stalin to implement emergency measures to address speculation by rich peasants and traders. Party members enforced grain collections and raided well-to-do peasants, known as kulaks, sparking resistance and shortages. Stalin initiated collectivization in 1929, forcing peasants to work on collective farms, kolkhoz, and transferring land and implements to state-controlled farms. Peasant resistance to collectivization resulted in livestock destruction and severe punishments. Despite efforts, production did not immediately increase, and the 1930–1933 harvest failures led to a devastating famine, causing over 4 million deaths. Criticism within the party of the confusion in industrial production and consequences of collectivization led to Stalin's purges, with over 2 million imprisoned or in labor camps by 1939, many on false charges and under torture. Despite these hardships, the Russian Revolution had a profound global impact. Let's explore its legacy. After the Bolsheviks' rise to power, socialist parties in Europe expressed mixed views, but the concept of a worker state inspired global interest. Communist parties emerged worldwide, including the Communist Party of Great Britain, influenced by the Bolshevik model. The Bolsheviks advocated for global socialist revolution, encouraging colonial peoples to adopt their approach through initiatives like the Comintern. By the 1950s, acknowledgement grew within the USSR and the global socialist movement that the country's governance diverged from the ideals of the Russian Revolution. Despite industrial and agricultural development, repressive policies led to criticism of the USSR's lack of essential freedoms for its citizens. By the end of the 20th century, while the USSR's international socialist reputation waned, socialist ideals continued to hold respect among its people, prompting a reassessment of socialism's implementation worldwide. The Russian Revolution wasn't just a local affair, it inspired socialists and revolutionaries worldwide. Communist parties sprang up globally, looking to the USSR as a model for a worker state. So, what have we learned from this journey through socialism and the Russian Revolution? Conclusion. We were able to analyze how the concept of socialism was introduced and how it played a key role in the Russian Revolution.
We hope that you have understood the topic. You can now study chapter notes, Watch video lectures and solve MCQ tests of this chapter on Edurif to ensure you score well in your school exams. And that's not all. You also get amazing courses for maths, science, English, Hindi, and much more for class 9. Thank you.